Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. I've got two special guests today. We're having such a good time. The only thing that is missing on my side is tea. I keep missing that cup of tea that I brewed earlier.
Oh,
So, welcome back, um, Dr. Angie. She's a serial entrepreneur and she runs Mrs. McCartney's Teas.com, Mrs. McCartney's CBD.com, and Mrs. McCartney's Wines.com. And Ruth McCartney is here. A lot of people call her the digital diva, and she's earned that title. She's the CEO of McCartney Media. Ruth can be found at ruthmccartney.com or McCartney.com. Did that change recently, Ruth? I thought it was McCartney Media, but I see it's McCartney.com. I'm on the
we
site right
have
now.
we have several. So the
Oh, so it
McCartney,
leads you back.
it sort of leads us back. McCartney.com is my husband Martin Nethercutt's daily project of it's a rock and roll newspaper. It's called the McCartney Times. All you need is news, and you can just go and create a free subscription. And he and his team archive everything to do with the Fab Four and Julian and Sean and the Ryman and what everybody's doing. So if you're any stripe of a Beatle fan and you have your first cup of tea every day, McCartney.com is the digital newspaper
Log
that he
on.
runs. So yeah, McCartney
Oh.
Multi-Media is our corporate branding agency. So, but if you just type in, McCartney and scroll down 77 pages till you get past the Paul bit, you'll find us.
I can't believe how busy the two of you are. Is it your secret to life is that you just work and stay busy and stay inspired and
Yeah, but
inspire
we love
others?
what we do, all three of
Yeah.
us, Martin, Ruth, and I. And who was it? Well, I think John Cleese was said, "If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life."
I think he was paraphrasing someone else, but yeah,
Probably,
no,
yeah.
absolutely. And I also think it's that old Euro trash thing is just we still can't believe we wake up every morning and pinch ourselves that we're in America. It's still the greatest country on
Oh,
earth.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
With so
we went,
many.
yeah,
Yeah.
we went through all of the hoops and shenanigans and what have you, including even though we have British passports, we had to pass for $185 a written English test. So me being me, I took a red pen to the interview and corrected the government's mistakes and grammatical errors on the paperwork. But that was
Well, good thing you didn't work
30
for them
years ago.
because you'd probably be laid off right now. But it
Yeah.
sounds like they need you.
You never know, you look in a big country. But I think we just always still have that shining city on a hill feeling when we wake up in the morning and there's just nothing you can't do. And in fact, I think it was you always felt like, you were the youngest child,
Mm.
you were the last of the litter, as my grandmother used to call
Yeah.
her. She's
The
40.
shakings of the box, my mother used to call me,
Splendid.
because she was 40 something when she had me.
But what, you came here and then somebody gave you a Shirley MacLaine book or
Yeah. I read a book by Shirley MacLaine. It was in her sort of hippy dippy days, when she was into all sorts of um, I can't think of the word to say it now, but when she was in
esoteric things.
esoteric, that's a
Darling,
nice, rather
we
nice
get
word.
3 extra points for esoteric.
Thank you very much.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. Exactly. Yeah. And I began to think then that, well, maybe I should have a stab at writing. I mean, I've always had a good sense of humor and I've always loved writing letters.
With a gob like that. Oh, sorry.
You
You
could
can't be
be bad.
bad.
Knock it off. Yeah. But
You sing beautifully.
sometimes. Mm.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just that whole you can do it,
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
And you
Yes.
were saying,
That's why we're busy. We never run out of ideas of
Oh,
things to
right.
do. This
I love that.
afternoon, I'm going to be taping a series of videos about how kids who are, whether they're in kindergarten or 12th grade right now, I've got a whole bunch of the digital diva kind of ideas as with AI and quantum computing coming in, how they're going to be able to future-proof their careers.
mm.
And I want to get that out there to districts and supervisors and teachers and parents
So
and
important.
kids.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
So
nobody wants to
helpful
be
too.
replaced. Yeah, just
What you're doing. And I mentioned, the digital diva is a nickname that you've been given, and um, you really started before, were at the forefront, like a pioneer in the internet, Ruth. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
amazing what you've been able to,
Mhm.
right.
the track
94.
that you've been able to lay, that just like this example you gave, helping kids,
Right.
um,
Well, I mean, if you're a kid nowadays, what do you want to be? I mean, I did a straw poll with a bunch of friends who have kids aged between 4 and 22, um, and everybody wants to be an influencer or famous. Guess
Doesn't
what?
anybody want to?
Guess what? In 15, 20 years from now, everybody we idolize and worship is going to be an AI generated character.
Mm,
Because guess what? Studios don't have to pay them overtime or health insurance or maternity leave.
mhm.
It's happening in K-pop. It's happening in Asia. They have ABBA was so smart. I mean, they replaced themselves with their own AI. They can stay on their yacht in Sweden and drink a nice cappuccino and the money rolls in. They don't even have to put their socks on. So, you know, having the aspiration to be an influencer is great, but do you want to be a prompt engineer that influences the creations that come out of AI?
Yeah. Do you want to be a plumber, a painter?
We need those.
Yeah, a wardrobe lady,
No,
you know.
we need HVAC people. We won't need taxi drivers because in 50 years everything will be automated and you'll be dropped off by drone and we'll all be wearing parachutes, right?
Oh, that's
So,
nice.
we're gonna need
Mhm.
visionaries in liberal arts and technology, and we're going to need the people who do the real work, like crawl under a house and fix somebody's cable, or an HVAC person, or a
Mhm.
whatever. And I think as a society, we've sort of made it, especially in America, where you have to go to a 4-year college and get a degree in something. Well, maybe you don't. I didn't. She left school at 11. I left at 15. My husband never went to college. And we came to California with a couple of $1,000 and we built a multi-million-dollar business.
Mm.
You follow your gut, you follow your heart, you work with good people and you volunteer for good people. And you always look further than you think you need to look, and then you'll be fine.
Mhm.
And there are times when you just need a cup of tea.
That's
There are
right.
times when the
Always.
technology
That
and
time is
and
always.
that's always, isn't it?
Yeah,
And the
sure.
speed of life, you just want to slow down and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Before we talk about Mrs. McCartney's organic teas, which I can't wait to talk about, I wanted to mention we went out. Ruth McCartney provided today's soundtrack, which I think is so unique and special and makes this interview even more special. This is the music that Ruth sent me, that you're listening to at the breaks. And the first song that we went out with on our last break was the Beatles' Golden Slumbers. And there's a story there. Before we start talking about tea, I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you want to share that story, Ruth, with us. There was a
Sure.
story behind that song.
Yeah, Paul was home one weekend. I was probably about 6, and because Madam here was and still is England's youngest ever um, certified qualified piano teacher at the age of 12. She got her Royal Victoria Licencia Music College certificate at 12,
Wow.
and so I
Wow.
just thought, and Jim, my dad, Jim McCartney, was an amazing by ear pianist, didn't read music. She was the boffin that could tell everybody where the notes are. Um, I was forced into going to piano lessons, and I hated the piano lessons because the woman had this really weird hairy cardigan, and she smelled funny. She smelled like gravy.
Like gravy.
Yeah,
Gravy. Old
when
gravy.
you don't want gravy.
Old
Yeah,
gravy.
Right.
when there's bangers and mash, gravy's fine, but right after breakfast, gravy. Mm.
And you're sitting next to her.
And then yeah, and so I just was mentally switched off to piano lessons, but she gave me a piece of music by Thomas Dekker from the 14th, 15th century to learn, and I was struggling my way through it. And the only thing I knew was on our upright, because we had two pianos, but on the upright piano in the dining room, the key was in the middle. And if you opened the lid, that was middle C, the white note with the two black notes up above it. That was middle C. And I knew where to find that on the sheet music. And so I am absolutely strangling this piece of music. And Paul came down with a hangover. He'd been out with the cousins in Bevington the night before. And he's like, shove over on the piano stool. He said, what is it you're trying to murder this morning? Holy let's have a look at this. What? So he didn't read music either. So between us, we sort of picked it out and we went, well, if that's F and then there's a line and a space, that's probably that black one. Oh, that's A minor. Okay. It took us forever to pick this thing out. And we start slowly playing it. And Ange comes in and she's like, oh, here, you know, sort of plays it from the sheet music. And Paul's like, wow, that's really pretty. What is that? And I said, oh, it's called Golden Slumbers. It's from originally it's music set to a poem by Thomas Dekker from the 15th century. And he's like, yeah, you know, the old day equivalent of yes, Queen. He's like, that's great. And I said, well, why? What about it? And he said, public domain. It's out of copyright. And bingo, next thing you know, he puts new lyrics to it, and it's
There it
on
is.
there it is
The
out
book.
for the world to see.
It's one of my favorite of their songs. It's a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
song.
it is.
Yeah, this is this type of stuff. Ruth, you're gonna have to write a book like this as well with your
Oh,
memories. But I mean, these are the stories that I imagine you find from Angie's diaries, and There Are
Mhm.
Faces I Remember, and you can get that on the therearefacesiremember.com. Also, I think you can get it if I remember correctly from Mrs. McCartney's Teas. It's on there as well under the shop.
Yeah, that's right. But it goes to our wonderful publisher in New York. Big shout out to Imagine and Wonder and Stephen Wilson and his team in Irvington, New York, who put this whole book together with Simon Mills and you know the design team and what have you. And you know it's hefty. It weighs 6.5 pounds. It comes in a slipcase. It's got a beautiful purple silk ribbon, and you know it's a thing. It's a collectible, and
It's
there are
a
only
book.
1,001 of them pressed, and each one comes with a blow-in 8x10 family photograph individually signed and numbered by Angie and I. And there are 3 of those numbers that if you pay attention to the small print in the book and you get the book with one of those 3 numbers, you win a very special prize.
Oh, that's neat. I didn't know that. That's really
There's a
cool.
little Easter egg in there
A
too.
little
Yeah.
Easter egg, yes. And that's again, that's like as you said, it's a book that will be on your coffee table or up on your collectibles and your books.
mm,
Something that the family and the friends will gather around and share. And
It's fun.
uh,
It's a fun
yeah,
read.
it's a
And
fun
then
book.
all the QR codes in it, you can link to hours and hours of video of us actually talking to some of these people.
You
Lawrence
mentioned
Taylor
the
from Wings and,
mhm.
you know,
yeah.
Pamela Des Barres and just great personalities in rock and roll.
You mentioned the family photos and you sent me some in the Dropbox here that are so beautiful. Like, you as a little girl and the whole family together, I just thought were such really neat family photos, and I
Yeah,
really enjoyed looking through them.
good memories. I mean, that's the sad part when you see people. 14 friends of ours lost everything in the Palisades and the Eaton fires, and so many of them had not scanned. There's an app, if you have an iPhone, there's an app called Notes. You can just open Notes, hit the paperclip, and scan every photograph, even in a frame off the wall. So you have it digitally. So many people lost so many memories. And that's
It's so
that's
sad.
what photographs are about. And that's what I was trying to create as the digital artist in There Are Faces I Remember, was these people are depicted in wildly different artistic styles. But as the age I was when I met them, that's the impression they made on me, and so that's how I painted them.
Another another reason to pick up a copy.
Absolutely.
There Are
Yeah.
Faces I Remember.com. Go there. Okay, so let's talk some tea. Talking tea a little bit here.
Okay.
Angie, can you explain the ritual, the British ritual of a cup of tea? And by the way, our show is going a little bit late into the 4 o'clock hour. I understand that 4 o'clock is tea time, and
That's
I
right.
apologize that if you have to get up and make a cup of tea, I will wait. So please do. But
Now,
can you?
the origin of the 4 o'clock tea time thing was way back in the early days, well before my time, when children worked from maybe the age of 8 onwards. When it got to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the boss would let everybody go to wherever the central point was and have a hot cup of tea, because that gave the caffeine, gave them a spurt to get back to work and work till 7 or 8 o'clock.
And a scone or something
a
sweet,
scone, yeah.
carbohydrates and caffeine.
Yeah.
On the house, let's all go to the canteen, and the boss is going to buy us a cup of tea. Well, how nice of him, because he's going to put us back down the mines till midnight.
Yeah. And there was no overtime or anything like that in those days.
No.
You just worked until you were allowed to go home.
What you mean? Wait, what? There's something called overtime? What's that?
It's a bit like now, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Yes, moving right along. But yeah, the idea of tea to sort of just rejuvenate the tiring workers at 4 o'clock in the afternoon so they'd go back and do some more.
And in Bavaria, conversely, I lived in Munich, and that's where I met Martin, my husband. They have an old ordinance from, again, the 1400s in Bavaria that if you work a union job, like in a BMW factory or whatever, or even building an Airbus, at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m., the company has to give you a break. And usually it's carbohydrates there. It's not necessarily caffeine, but you can still choose between a wheat beer and a pretzel. So you can actually get 2 free beers a day on a union job in the state of Bavaria because it's carbohydrates and it gives you energy.
I like both of those things.
Yeah.
But now I
You're a
can.
union gigger. And a lot of this trivia stuff is in this book we wrote together called All You Need Is
All
Tea.
you need is tea. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I like both of them. I'll take a pretzel, a hot pretzel, and a beer, and 2 beers, even better. But,
2 beers,
but
yeah.
the tea now makes sense to me. Why it whenever I've been around anyone from the UK or London or England, and they're so. It's like we've got to have it, and
Yeah.
so it's become this. It started out to motivate the workers maybe, but it has become so ingrained that it's like, and it's a tradition that is honored every
Yeah.
day.
It's like coffee.
And
It's like coffee for Italians.
yeah, it's turned into something,
Yeah.
Okay.
communal,
Yes.
and I love that. That's a good story. Well, how did Mrs. McCartney's tea business begin? How did that idea come?
Oh, some years ago, we had it was a 4th of July, and we had a backyard party here. And one of our friends, who was a recovering alcoholic, said, we were pouring out beers and wines for everybody. And he said, I'll just have a cup of tea, please. And I remembered I had one of those big brown teapots, or Brown Betty, I think they call them. I brought it with me from England to Australia, to America, to Germany. It's been all around the world with me, like my diaries. And I got it down from a shelf way back. It was full of dust and cobwebs, made a hot pot of tea for this gentleman. And he said, have you ever thought of, branding tea for yourself? What's more English than tea? And what's more English than the Beatles? And the idea was just born from there. And we went on and researched, and we wanted to find, Ruth will tell you more about that, about how we...
Yeah, it took me about 2.5 years to find suppliers around the world. We did straw polls on what kind of flavors. Obviously, English breakfast and Earl Grey are no-brainers, right? But then we went into this whole, we have Strawberry Fields green tea, and we have Maharishi peach, we have Abbey Road apple, we have Blue Jay blueberry, we have, Rockstar Rescue.
And we had Earl Grey, and then I renamed that 50 Shades of Earl Grey.
Dirty old bag she is. Anyway, so
get naughty with.
Yeah.
And so I had to find farmers and suppliers all over the place, and then importers who, could handle the whole thing, because I wasn't going to be down in the middle of running a digital empire and building websites for rock stars and restaurants, be like, oh, I'm just going to order X amount of 1,000 pounds of tea to be delivered to the port of, San Pedro, and then figure out how to, because you have to get it in a tea bag. You have to get it in the country. You have to get it graded and sorted. Then it has to pass the FDA. Then in some cases it has to be halal or kosher certified. Then you have to decide what kind of tea bag material you're going to put it in. And ours are Soilon, which is only made in Japan. And they're tetrahydrons. So that you would call them pyramids, but they're actually 3-dimensional pyramids. They don't have a square bottom, they have a triangular bottom, because it seeps out more tea. Then you have to figure out, are you going to put the string and the tag? When the tags are made in decimal numbers, so you have to buy 10,000 tags, but the tea bags are sold in dozens, so never the twain shall meet with the math. Do
Like
you
like
want
hot dogs, hot dog
Yeah,
buns.
that's right.
exactly hot
Hot
dog
dog
mat,
buns,
correct?
yeah.
And so, do you want to staple the string and the tag? And if you do, you have to have $100 million liability insurance in case the staple comes off and goes in somebody's gum or they swallow it. And then
Wow.
the tag has to be printed with food safe grade organic ink, because if it falls in the thing and you're drinking ink, you
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah.
to just get a
Yeah.
tea bag from leaf into somebody's cup. It took me 3 years to figure
I
it
would have
all.
never thought about all those things that,
Oh, of course.
And you don't until
and
you
you
decide to
still
start a tea company.
and then you still proceeded. That's incredible.
Oh yeah, no,
Because,
I'm a dump back down bitch.
I, yeah, those sound like a lot of challenges. I think I would have got to number two and said, you know what? How about I don't know.
Yeah, I
How
don't
about a
know.
coffee company? What a
How
juice.
about well, that's coffee's actually even worse
Yeah,
because
that probably wouldn't solve my problem.
it
Well,
has to
that's
go through an
incredible.
exchange, and coffee prices, are like on a stock market. You have to bid on prices. Tea is pretty stable, it's shelf stable, it doesn't need refrigerating. And if it's kept out of UV light, its shelf life is, 5 to 6 years. So it's a pretty stable commodity. But then we had to figure out, by putting our name on it, you can't have 8-year-olds picking it. If you're going to say it's organic, it either has to be certified organic, or what I found with some of the earlier flavors we did, I couldn't put the organic USDA sticker on it because it was grown at 8,500 feet, which is above the pest line. So there are no pests, there are no mosquitoes, there's no, so because they have no pests, they don't spray for pests. Therefore, that tea picked in the Himalayas, for example, in Dimbula, that doesn't go through the USDA inspection because it doesn't need to, because the pests don't live that high. Therefore, you can't put the USDA organic sticker on it
Mm.
because it's grown above the pest line.
Hmm.
Oh my God, I could, honest to God,
Anybody ready for a glass of wine from Mrs. McCartney's Wines?
Oh,
yeah, well, we're actually in the middle of working out a new distribution deal. Our winemaker in Kemah, Texas, who is also an amazing chef. You've had him on, David Skinner.
Uh-huh.
Um, he is changing his distribution people at the moment, so we're hoping to get much wider distribution for Angie's Wines on that one. But yeah, who knew the simple cup of tea that, like, if you're in a Hilton Garden Inn, there's the envelope, there's the printing on the envelope, there's the tea bag, the staple, the string, and the tag, and they all come from 5 different suppliers, and they have to be shipped and shipped. So we were trying to create a supply chain that everything gets done in one place and shipped once to save planes flying around with all this crap. And
Well,
PS, and children can't pick it, and PS, it has to be organic. So people are like, why is your tea $13.99? Well, do you want the whole story? I'd be happy to tell you.
well, the whole story makes me appreciate what you've gone through. And I know you've gone through just as much pains in choosing the tea leaves and the blends,
Yep.
and picking the farmers and the purveyors that you purchase from. So let's talk about it in the next break. I know that's very important, but there are also you've also got some kind of neat facts that I like, and one of them I'm just going to read this from I think it's from your label, but Earl Grey. I had no idea. This is makes you sit back and think about the things you don't know, but the things that you touch daily that you don't question or you don't ask why. But Earl Grey has a neat story. According to the Grey family, the tea was specifically blended by a Chinese Mandarin for Lord Grey
that's
to
right.
to suit the water at Howick Hall, the family seat in Northumberland.
Northumberland, yep.
Okay, using bergamot in particular to offset the preponderance of lime in their local water. I mean, how
That's right.
interesting. And Lady Grey used it to entertain in London as a
Hmm.
political hostess. Earl Grey was a one-time Prime Minister of England in the 1800s and had a very colorful personal history, especially with the ladies, they say. But those Earl Grey, that's a tea
Yeah.
bag that I've used all my life and never really thought about. I've served it in restaurants and I've been around it, but I just thought it's so interesting to learn the backstories about things that are made or
Right.
things that are produced. And I love you guys have a story. I think companies that have stories really stand out to me. And Mrs. McCartney's Organic Teas has a really great story. Both of you have really interesting stories. I could probably talk to you all day if you had the time, but I won't impose myself on you. Dr. Angie McCartney and Ruth McCartney are my special guests today. Go to mrsmccartneysteas.com. There are so many great teas on there and packages, and you'll just get lost. But don't get too lost. Get the tea delivered to you, mrsmccartneysteas.com. Don't forget to hit order because then it will arrive and you'll appreciate the aroma, the taste, the stories behind Mrs. McCartney's teas. We're going to take a quick break. I wanted to, the music that we're going out with right now, the song is Steve Tyrell's The Way You Look Tonight. Did you have a story there, Ruth, or just a song that you love?
Yeah, no, Steve Tyrell, who is the jazz great, he took over from Bobby Short at the Carlisle Hotel, Cafe Carlisle, the Christmas season. When Bobby Carlisle passed, he said, there's only one person who can take my place, and that's Steve Tyrell. And Steve is one of our oldest clients. We built and still manage stevetyrell.com. He's just a jazz meister. He's got an incredible story as well. Music supervisor and composer, and was asked to temp in a vocal for Father of the Bride. They couldn't find a singer. They wanted a Dr. John kind of a voice. And so he went to the studio with a demo. It was a cassette, I guess, in those days. And he got the director Nancy in his car, and he's like, well, this is what I'm thinking for the mom and father dance, daddy daughter dance wedding scene. And he played it, and she was like, well, yeah, just the way you look tonight, but who's that guy, that singer? We have to have him. And he's like, you're joking, right? It's me. And that was how his singing career started.
Oh, what a good story. So
Yeah.
enjoy the music, but before you do, let me tell you about one of the new books by Angie and Ruth McCartney. It's called All You Need Is Tea. Angie and Ruth McCartney have researched the entire history and geography of tea to bring you the backstory, the characters, including the peachy tips chimpanzees, which I want to hear about. So I hope we have time for that, and tea's international appeal, and the decorum and the etiquette of dozens of tea varieties from around the world. It's become one of the world's most popular drinks, has been for a long time. There is also a free downloadable ebook of recipes and full color illustrations compiled by Ruth entitled With a Little Help from My Scones, including some of the Great Britain's legacy desserts, sweets, and savories that have long since disappeared from the popular menus of today. You'll read about the origin stories of tea in Russia, the boba tea in Taiwan, Turkish tea, British traditions, and the world's top destinations for afternoon tea. You can learn more about the Indian plantations and the people of the trade, like Twinings, etc., and the rising popularity of South Africa's
Rooibos.
rooibos. Those early days in China, and much, much more. This book is a truly a must for any fan of tea. As the McCartneys say, all you need is tea. Okay, Mrs. McCartney's Organic Teas at mrsmccartneysteas.com. We'll be right back. And in case you forgot, we're listening to Steve Tyrell, The Way You Look Tonight.